Hi everybody, I'm Brittany Lewis with Forbes Breaking News. Joining me now is my colleague, editor of ForbesWomen, Maggie McGrath. Maggie, thank you so much for joining me.
Thanks for having me.
It's a tough conversation today. There's been a divisive abortion ruling in Texas, and Kate Cox is the 31-year-old who sued the Lone Star State to get access to an abortion. She recently fled the state to an undisclosed other state to get the procedure. Can you walk us through how we got here?
Well, if you really want to rewind, we got here because conservatives had been trying to undo Roe v. Wade from the minute it was decided in 1972.
So this has footprints back to June 2022.
It's not just June 2022. It really goes back to 1973 when Roe v. Wade was decided. From the minute practically that decision came down and made abortion legal in the United States, you had abortion opponents trying to undo that decision, put in other restrictions state by state. So it was really 50 years of fighting that led to the Dobbs decision in June 2022, which put the question of abortion back in the hands of the states. Where we stand right now in December 2023 is that 14 states outright ban abortion. Another 7 have severe restrictions where abortion proponents would say it is essentially eliminated, but Texas is one of those 14 states. So into this environment steps Kate Cox, a mother of 2 with a very wanted 3rd pregnancy. And in November, she was about 20 weeks pregnant when she was told that the pregnancy had trisomy 18. It's a chromosomal abnormality that basically means her fetus could die before being born, and so she would have a stillbirth, or other medical experts say that the baby would survive hours, minutes, days after being born. Complicating this situation is the fact that Kate had had 2 C-sections to have her other 2 kids and had been to the ER 3 times in November for severe cramping and fluid leaks that had an indeterminate origin. And doctors were telling her this was a very risky pregnancy for her current health and her future fertility. This is important because Kate and her husband have said they wanted a large family. So the medical experts, the expertise of her doctors and the recommendation of her doctors was you need a medically necessary abortion in order to protect your life and to protect your future fertility. But she lives in Texas where abortion is essentially banned. So she filed for an exception, and a Travis County judge, a lower court, granted her approval for this. And I do want to read what that judge said because it's kind of remarkable. This Travis County district judge on December 7th said, "The idea that Ms. Cox wants desperately to be pregnant and that this law might actually cause her to lose that ability is shocking and would be a genuine miscarriage of justice." So you have a district judge saying Kate Cox should be able to have an abortion so she can protect her fertility. The story doesn't end there. We know that State Attorney General Ken Paxton almost immediately released a statement telling Kate's doctors that the lower court decision will not insulate you or anyone else from civil and criminal liability for violating Texas's abortion laws, including first-degree felony prosecutions. I'm reading here because I don't want to get anything wrong from these statements. So the next day, the Texas Supreme Court halted the lower court decision, and on Monday, December 11th, the Texas Supreme Court undid the lower court decision, and that is why we had Kate needing to leave the state in order to get the care that she needed.
So I just want to get this all straight. This is not a viable pregnancy. This is impacting her health currently, has a good potential of impacting her future fertility. So what's the argument here to keep her pregnant?
There are some organizations with anti-choice or pro-life or whatever term you want to use who have argued that quote-unquote baby Cox should be given the chance to survive and I guess survive all the odds. Now, I was doing a decent amount of reading on trisomy 18, and the Washington Post has a really, really good explainer that I don't want to direct people away from Forbes, but this was pretty comprehensive. And this report cites that about 50% of babies carried to term with trisomy 18 are born alive. That means 50% are not. And then of the ones who do survive birth, an estimated 90 to 95% do not survive beyond their first year. So those who argue that the pregnancy is viable, I think may not know those statistics, may not be paying attention to those statistics. Further, the argument that the Texas Supreme Court made, and here this is a legal argument that I am citing, in layman's terms, the higher court said that Kate and her lawyers failed to prove that this was a medically necessary abortion. And the court argued that Kate's doctor, quote, asked a court to pre-authorize the abortion, yet she could not, or at least did not, attest to the court that Ms. Cox's condition poses the risks the exception requires. Now, I have yet to find a really good explanation as to what was missing in the legal case. I've looked, and maybe I'm missing something myself, but I've yet to see a legal scholar say this is what her doctors and lawyers should have said in order to grant this exception, which is leading, I think, several law and politics experts to say that there are political motivations at play here.
I do want to talk about how politics comes into this. I was looking for any pro-life voice, any Republican voice to say that they were for this decision. I have yet to find one. And Ann Coulter tweeted this, quote, "The pro-life movement has gone from compassion for the child to cruelty to the mother and child. Trisomy 18 is not a condition that is compatible with life." So what has the response been that you've seen to this story?
I've seen a broad majority are in support of Kate Cox and her ability to make a medically necessary decision, and I haven't seen anyone really defending the state of Texas or Ken Paxton right now. I'd also point out there's a new poll out from NPR and PBS today that 85% of respondents, even if they support abortion restrictions under normal conditions, 85% of these respondents say that there should be exceptions to prohibitions in the case of the life of the mother and cases of rape and incest. So I think you're seeing a general public that appreciates the nuance of this issue, and that public opinion is at odds with some of the political and legal decisions we're seeing in the state of Texas.
And it's a really heartbreaking story because this is a wanted pregnancy. She is a mother of two. There is that photo of her posing with the bump, and now she has to travel out of state and go through this not at her own home. And this is obviously has been a national story for the past week. And as someone who covers women's stories extensively, what do you think is missing from the national dialogue here?
I think there's a lot that's missing, but first and foremost, when we focus on the medical exceptions that, to be clear, are necessary, we lose sight of the vast majority of abortions. 93% happen in the first trimester. Many are medication abortions versus D&C or surgical abortions. And we lose sight of the other reasons pregnant people might be seeking an abortion, including the fact that they might not want a child ever, or not right now, or that they can't afford it. And I think when we talk about abortion in such stark medical terms, we risk moralizing the issue, and we risk creating an environment where there are good reasons and bad reasons. And that, to me, feels stigmatizing and feels dangerous in a society where arguably every person wants to be able to have bodily autonomy and wants to make their own healthcare decisions. And most Americans don't want the state questioning that based on the polling that we've seen.
Maggie, I am really curious, politically, does this matter that this was a wanted pregnancy?
Oh, of course it matters that she wanted the pregnancy. I think the wants and needs and hopes and dreams of all patients, regardless of gender, matter, right? We talk about it with end-of-life care. We talk about it with cancer care. We talk about it with do not resuscitate. I interviewed Secretary Hillary Rodham Clinton earlier this year where she talked about her ailing father and the ability to make the decision at his end of life about what were his chances of survival. And I've talked to other people whose parents have had severe healthcare situations where you have to make the determination, how extraordinary of an effort do we want to make to preserve life here? You have these conversations at other points in the healthcare journey, and you do have end-of-life laws that, and assisted suicide laws that is part of a separate conversation here. But to get back to your question, does the individual's desire matter? I would say, based on my experience as a person, yes. And to bring in the Forbes angle here, do the opinions and matter? to bring in the Forbes angle here, I talk to a lot of entrepreneurs who are trying to solve the fertility conundrum that faces so many women. We have entrepreneurs who are focused on building their companies and hitting their mid-30s and realizing that their chances of carrying a healthy pregnancy are lower than they'd like. I think a lot of people want to determine their own family structures. So we have other entrepreneurs who are founding, including if you look at the under 30 list, who are founding fertility companies that are trying to make fertility care more accessible to those who want to build families. So I absolutely think wants and desires and dreams are essential here. I just think it's important that we don't moralize those wants and dreams.
Do you think by saying this was a wanted pregnancy, it in fact stigmatizes unwanted pregnancies?
It could potentially, and I have sources who have indicated this to me as well. When you focus, when we as a society, as news media, focus on the extreme scenarios, and the cases where, well, she wanted this. There are women who, and people who don't want to be pregnant. And my fear in focusing on the extreme medical scenarios is that we lose sight of the desire, the financial desire, the economic desire, the personal desire to maybe not have children at a certain moment in time. And basically, I found this quote from Elizabeth Sepper, a law professor at UT Austin, who said, you know, when a majority of Texans want the legislature to expand access to abortion, it's a bold political move to throw the weight of the state against an extremely sympathetic plaintiff. It shows that Texas politicians feel so shielded from any sort of electoral consequences related to attacks on women's equality that they're just going to keep on keeping on. And that was Elizabeth Sepper at UT Austin. And I think that quote matters in the course of this conversation because when we're talking about voter desires and when we're talking about what the majority of a population wants, and if the state is acting contrary to that, that's something that matters.
I do now want to zoom out just a bit and get the 30,000-foot view here. As you've said, this has really been a conversation since 1973, and I want to know, what are you watching out for next?
I have about 3 things that I'm watching. The first, to continue on the last point, I am talking to the entrepreneurs in the Forbes universe about the companies that they're founding, right? If you look at reproductive health broadly, you have contraceptive access, you have fertility access, you have menopause solutions. There are a lot of really smart women looking to advance science and technology, so it helps human health broadly. So I'm really curious to see the way those companies grow. I'm curious to see the investors that fund those companies. I think that is the entrepreneurial angle that I'm watching for. That's number 1. Number 2, I know from my sources there are a number of ballot measures that are in the works for 2024, and they're still in certain states like Florida and Arizona seeking signatures on petitions to officially put an abortion vote on the ballot in the 2024 general election. So I'll be watching to see if those ballot measures pass. And then broadly speaking, I don't like the political horse race. I don't like the frenzy of election years. I think matters of bodily autonomy are important whether it's a general election, a midterm election, or no election. It matters all year round, every year. But we have seen how this issue has galvanized voters in the 2022 midterms and the elections just in November. So I will be watching the ways in which this issue shows up in 2024 and how it affects voter attitudes.
Maggie McGrath, per usual, thank you for coming in and providing your insights.
Thank you.